Next time you want to play the high-class lady, at least pick a place that matches your background, Karen sneered. Girls like you, black, loud, and looking for trouble. I've seen it all, Keller barked, then kicked Jolie hard, without warning, without reason, just because of her skin. But what he didn't know, the woman he humiliated, was FBI Chief Jolie Bennett, the one about to burn his rotten system to the ground. Which state are you in? Do cops like Keller walk free where you live? Jolie Bennett stepped through the transparent glass door of a high-end fashion store, located on the bustling pedestrian street of a busy shopping mall. Crystal lights shone down, sparkling and reflecting on each piece of luxurious glass and every meticulously displayed outfit, arranged like works of art. Shoppers bustled about, their voices mingling with the scent of expensive perfumes, creating an atmosphere of opulence and splendor. Yet amid this luxury, Jolie, a tall black FBI agent with sharp eyes hidden behind a strong exterior, felt an invisible barrier. Her skin color, out of place in this glossy world, was the focal point of gazes that lingered not with admiration, but with disdain and scrutiny. She was not easily intimidated. Her beauty, with a delicate face, sharp intellect, and steel-willed resolve honed through years of investigative work, helped her remain calm, despite anticipating discriminatory looks and unavoidable prejudice. But this time, as she approached a delicate white dress and gently touched the soft silk fabric, Jolie softly asked the saleswoman, "Does this suit me?" Kieran, the young local sales assistant, looked up at Jolie with a disdainful glare. Her voice was hoarse, tinged with coldness. "We don't have clothes for people like you, black-skinned, and, ma'am, people without money don't fit in here either." Those words drilled deep into Jolie's mind. The outside luxury turned into an invisible wall separating her from that world. On one side was sparkling light, on the other, dark prejudice. Yet Jolie's eyes held steadfast calm and determination. She stood still for a moment, feeling each heartbeat and a rising wave of undeniable anger, but she knew she had to control her emotions and maintain professionalism. In that moment, Jolie lifted her chin and looked straight at Karen with an icy, unforgiving gaze. "Instead of judging others by skin color or clothes, you should focus on improving yourself, doing your job well, developing a gracious attitude and intelligence. That's what makes people memorable." The words landed like a precise punch, making Karen flush, narrow her eyes, and grow angry. She quickly turned and strode toward the phone, hands trembling as she dialed the police. Jolie sensed the injustice, but also felt a small flame ignite within, a flame of resistance, of determination not to let dark prejudices defeat her. Outside the store, the sound of quick footsteps and the cold voice of Officer William Keller rang out, signaling a series of events about to explode, changing Jolie's life and opening a journey confronting the deep darkness in the system. Jolie walked out of the store with her chin held high, but her hands were clenched tightly to suppress the swelling emotions inside. The insult she had just endured was nothing new, but this time it hit the final limit of her patience. She did not yell or respond with anger. She knew she would handle it differently, but just minutes later, a harsh siren blared through the crowded pedestrian street. A patrol car stopped by the curb, blocking the walkway like an arrogant declaration. A man stepped out, tall, short hair, face cold as steel, eyes scanning the crowd with no friendliness. William Keller. The officer had committed many crimes, but was never prosecuted. His face showed clear displeasure the moment he saw Jolie, not because of an emergency, but simply because she was a black woman standing where he believed she did not belong. The atmosphere tightened, as if suffocated. Bystanders stopped walking. Some pulled out their phones. Others bowed their heads and walked faster to avoid trouble. Karen, the sales assistant, rushed out, pointing at Jolie, repeating in a shrill voice, "It's her. She shouted, threatened me, and caused a disturbance in the store." Keller did not ask another question. No camera check, no witness verification. "ID!" he barked, voice firm but impatient. Jolie slowly took out her wallet and pulled out her ID and FBI badge. "I am not causing a disturbance. I just—" "Shut up!" Keller cut her off, not bothering to look closely at the papers. "Black people like you don't dare cause trouble here." Jolie stood straight, eyes unblinking. She understood the game. Judgment first, verification later, but this time she was the one playing. Black girls like you come here to steal, insult, and disrupt order, I know that, and you're still arguing, Keller declared decisively, his voice growing louder. I haven't done anything wrong, Jolie retorted. Before she could react, Keller stepped forward and kicked her hard. Jolie staggered, lost balance, and fell onto the cold tiled floor. A small, "Oh!" came from the crowd, but no one moved forward. A strike without reason, without proof. He continued shouting, "Next time, if you want to play the high-class lady, at least choose an area suitable for your background." Jolie lay there for a few seconds, her face turned sideways, her cheek burning, her hands gripping the pavement, but her eyes did not bow. She pushed herself up, quickly wiped the blood from her chin. Every muscle ached sharply, but the sharper pain was humiliation, not for herself, but for the system that created people like Keller. She did not retreat. She did not back down. That gaze, that stance, no longer belonged to a victim but marked the beginning of a battle. William Keller forcefully shoved Jolie into the back seat of the patrol car. Without a single gentle word, without the slightest gesture of respecting basic human rights, he slammed the door shut like sealing a conquest, then turned to the crowd with a haughty gaze, flashing a smug smile, as if he had just taken down a notorious criminal. "Clear out, these black rebels," he muttered loud enough for some passers-by to hear, their curious looks turning cold. The car rolled forward, passing rows of commercial streets glittering with lights. Amid the bustle, the patrol vehicle felt as heavy as an iron cage. Keller abruptly slammed on the brakes at a busy intersection, stepped out, stood upright in front of the car, and thumped his chest loudly. "Don't think you can cause chaos here. I am the symbol of order, of white justice." His words echoed through the street, making some bystanders stop. Some recorded on their phones, others quietly left, but no one dared intervene. Inside the car, Jolie sat silently, her head slightly tilted to one side. She was in pain, but the physical hurt did not break her. Her eyes no longer showed immediate resistance, but a cold, dark zone remembering, observing, calculating. When they arrived at the police station, Keller barely bothered to write a report. He handed over the case verbally to an officer on duty, tossing a makeshift nameplate scribbled with the words, "Disturbance. Keep her a few hours, then release her. People like this aren't worth the time," he spat out before leaving as if discarding garbage. In the sparse holding cell, a young officer in his 20s glanced at Jolie, unable to hide his awkwardness. "Do you have anything to say?" Jolie slowly pulled out her wallet. She placed 2 items on the table, a Federal Service ID and an official badge. Under the dim yellow light, the words Federal Bureau of Investigation, Director, cut sharply through the suffocating atmosphere like a knife. At first, the young officer thought it was a joke. A middle-aged female officer behind him stepped forward, skeptical but cautious, tapping the internal verification code. She paused after 3 seconds. On the screen, portrait, identity, position, 100% authentic. Less than 10 minutes later, the temporary county police chief appeared, followed by 3 other commanding officers. Their faces were tense, both confused and fearful. "We sincerely apologize, Director Bennett. This is a serious mistake," one spoke, voice dry. They quickly called her personal doctor to check Jolie's injuries. A young officer brought a blanket, water, and an apology as a reflex change. Jolie did not say much. She sat quietly, eyes staring into the distance. No anger, no resentment. She didn't need to raise her voice, because her silence now carried a weight more terrifying than any accusation. When the nurse finished bandaging, Jolie stood, calmly adjusting her shirt. "Where is William Keller now?" she asked, not loudly, but everyone heard clearly. No one answered. Jolie left the holding cell, each step slow but determined. Each step pressed not only on the cold tiles of the police station, but also carved a deep mark into the system she was about to expose. She carried an unhealed wound, but in her eyes her will had sharpened like a blade, ready to tear off the masks of those who claimed justice while trampling the innocent. Jolie sat quietly in the federal unit's vehicle, her hand lightly gripping the seat edge, her eyes silently gazing out the window. She said nothing on the journey, but inside her mind screamed unanswered questions. Her body ached, shoulders and neck burning from the violent shove, but her spirit was unshaken, even more alert than ever. At the nearest federal medical facility, her personal doctor was already present. After a thorough examination, he confirmed soft tissue injuries, widespread bruising but no life-threatening conditions. "I've seen you through real bullets," he said softly, "and I've never seen your eyes so sharp as now." Jolie smiled faintly but did not respond. The door swung open. Sarah Mitchell entered silently and immediately hugged Jolie tightly. The embrace was neither flamboyant nor tearful, but of those who had lived and fought side by side. "I heard the news and my heart dropped," Sarah whispered. Jolie gently patted her back. "I'm fine, but the system isn't." After the nurse left, the two sat at a wooden table, cold white light illuminating their faces. "Why didn't you reveal your identity from the start?" Sarah asked, puzzled. Jolie answered slowly, eyes fixed on the bruise on her wrist. "I used to think if I kept quiet, did my job well, avoided waves, I could avoid unnecessary clashes. But now I know. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is complicity." A message flashed on the phone. It was from the regional police chief. A short line. "I want to meet privately. There's a way to keep this from the press. To protect the force's reputation." Sarah read, put down the phone firmly. "No, we don't save the reputation of a system that lets Keller exist. We have to expose it." Jolie nodded without hesitation. She turned to Sarah, voice steady but eyes fiery. "Keller is the problem, but he's just the tip. What I need is the root." Immediately, she requested access to William Keller's internal files. Sarah connected to the FBI's high-level data system, inputting triple authentication codes. The screen displayed lines of information: work history, complaint records, and professional reports. Within 5 minutes, anomalies surfaced continuously. Reports were edited, and civil complaints of abuse mysteriously closed. The name of a veteran lawyer, Edward Sinclair, appeared repeatedly in many documents defending and bailing Keller. A series of shady connections emerged behind seemingly harmless words. Sarah exhaled softly. "Do you know how deep this goes?" Jolie smirked slightly. "The deeper the better. I don't want to just pluck a thorn. I want to uproot the whole thing." On the screen, Keller's photo appeared again, from a protest case 6 months ago, whose files had been removed from the internal portal. Jolie stared straight into the cold eyes in the picture, whispering clearly as a vow, "All right, the game begins." The screen before Jolie and Sarah continuously displayed internal data files, accessible only to those with special clearance. Dense lines of text and cascading charts flooded their eyes, yet both remained silent, each wearing an expression of icy concentration. This was no longer a matter of one person being insulted on the street. This was the aftermath of a system manipulated by hidden hands. "Keller, access granted," Sarah murmured, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Nearly 30 internal complaints from the past 5 years appeared on the screen. Allegations of excessive force, racial bias, and unlawful arrests. But what made Jolie frown was not the number, it was the processing time. Most cases were closed in under 48 hours, no hearings, no investigative notes, just the familiar line, "Closed, insufficient evidence." "Look at this," Sarah said, enlarging one report. In over half the cases, the witnesses were the same 3 people, sometimes temporary staff, sometimes supervising officers. The names matched, the testimonies matched, even the typos in their statements were identical. Jolie nodded, her voice low and sharp as a blade. "They copy-pasted the statements. This is a pre-written cover-up." She clicked on Involved Parties, and a list appeared, all pointing to 3 familiar names. Marcus Hayes, the rapid response captain present at many of Keller's arrests. Laura Deeks, the internal investigations coordinator who filtered complaints and drafted conclusions. Terry Bloom, the department attorney defending the police in civil suits. "It's a protection ring." Jolie said, narrowing her eyes. Keller strikes, Hayes secures the scene, Deeks buries the complaint, and Bloom buries it in court. Sarah pulled up an internal low system records of who edited which files. They traced a string of arrests labeled "disturbing the peace," yet those detained had no criminal records. Some were elderly women of color or students. The pattern was identical: provoked, mischaracterized, silenced. And he still got promoted? Sarah asked in disbelief. Jolie fell silent, staring at a timeline chart where identical incidents recurred in regular cycles. Each time, Keller escaped unscathed. Never suspended, never a negative report forwarded to federal authorities. "The problem isn't him," Jolie whispered. "Keller isn't smart enough to manipulate the entire system. Someone paved the way for him, someone with more power than the department itself." She stood and walked to the whiteboard, marking the 3 names and drawing an arrow upward. "We need to know who's above them and why they're protecting him." Sarah nodded and returned to the console. "I'll trace every personnel change related to Keller over the last 3 years." Jolie said nothing more, her gaze fixed on closed. Insufficient evidence, as if facing a wall she knew too well. But this time, she would not just knock. She would break it down. The room fell silent, except for the steady clatter of keys and the pale glow of monitors reflecting on Sarah's face. On the screen, points showing Keller's temporary reassignments after serious complaints flickered into view. Odd annotations like "support assignment elsewhere," "internal leave," "short-term retraining," all following citizen reports of brutality. Jolie leaned forward. "Who approved these reassignments?" Sarah added another query. Seconds later, a name repeatedly appeared in the administrative approval column: Edward Sinclair. "Sinclair is a judge, not police personnel," Sarah whispered, astonished. Jolie went still. She had heard that name. A powerful local judiciary figure known for defending law enforcement against rising anti-police sentiment. She asked Sarah to dig into Sinclair's past. In minutes, they found his profile. Former Northern District prosecutor turned state judge, with authority to oversee and approve police department matters. Sarah pulled up 2 civil cases where citizens accused officers of assault, one dismissed for lack of prosecutable evidence, the other dropped due to a technicality. Both had been overseen by Judge Sinclair. Jolie fell silent, memories surfacing of a public forum meeting in South Ridge 3 years ago, where a limping black veteran with a clouded left eye tearfully dispersed when Sarah brought up his name, Darnell Whitmore. Jolie's voice softened. He was silenced once. Now, I need him to speak again. They arranged a meeting with Darnell, preparing paperwork and security. But that night, Sarah's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. No number, no ID, only, "Don't drag the FBI into local matters. Some things, if exposed, you won't live through." Sarah's face went pale as she showed Jolie the screen. Jolie scanned it, unmoving, lips curling in a barely perceptible smile. Anger or steely resolve, it was hard to tell. "They know we're closing in," she said slowly, her eyes freezing in the darkness. "That means we're on the right track." Mintran is the kind of person who would never draw attention in a crowded room, but he's the one you want by your side if everything suddenly falls apart. In a light gray shirt with neatly combed hair and a slender build, his gaze is so sharp that a single glance at a line of code reveals whatever is hidden in millions of bytes of data. He works in the FBI's high-level security data analysis division, where danger isn't measured by firepower, but by the speed of intrusion detection and the ability to trace obscured log entries. He had worked alongside Jolie Bennett on 6 major operations, from busting a human trafficking ring in El Paso to decrypting malware in the Defense Department. He knew her computer habits, could tell when she was angry by the rhythm of her keystrokes, and recognized that her ponytail tilted to the left was a sign she was under pressure. He never said a word, but he was always there exactly when needed. When he heard Jolie had been arrested and assaulted in broad daylight, it hit him like an icy storm sweeping through his entire office. He didn't watch the full video. Seeing Keller shove her down and the crowd turn away was enough. He shut down his workstation, ripped off his headset, and stormed out before his shift had even ended. "Don't get involved in internal politics," a colleague warned when he accessed Ridgepoint police data. Min didn't reply. He didn't care about politics. He cared about the woman who had once shielded him from gunfire during the Atlanta raid. He sifted through every log entry in the county system. Expertly encrypted file deletion commands couldn't escape his notice. Timestamps had been altered and server responses contained inconsistent error codes, clear signs of covert erasure. More tellingly, the operation was executed with a special admin privilege held by only 3 people. He compiled the evidence, neatly encrypted it, and sent it directly to Jolie via her personal secure channel, adding the note. Logs show civil complaint data linked to Keller was deleted 3 minutes after filing. Sarah met Min in the federal parking lot 3 mornings ago. The wind howled through concrete pillars, but his voice was colder. "Jolie doesn't need protecting," he said, eyes fixed on the steering wheel. "Damn it. But someone like her can't be silenced by the trash in the system." Jolie received the data minutes after her debrief with the investigative team. She replied with just 2 words, "Thanks, Min." No exclamation point, no more. Yet Min reread that message several times before deleting it. He exhaled slowly, lit a cigarette, and let the smoke carry his longing for the woman he kept in his heart. That night, long after the office lights went out, Mintz sat before the black screen of the state police internal forum. For an hour, using a fake identity, he hunted down and removed 23 posts that defamed, mocked, and smeared Jolie's reputation, all from accounts logging in via Ridgepoint PD's internal IP addresses. No one knows he did it. He doesn't need them to. For men, affection doesn't require reciprocation. But he swore this in his heart. Whoever dares harm Jolie will never rest easy in the dark. Marcus Hayes entered the interagency briefing room with a casual stride, broad shoulders clad in a crisp uniform, eyes narrowed as if this room and everyone in it were his underlings. As captain of the Rapid Response Team, Hayes not only coordinates the county's armed deployments, but is also William Keller's closest ally. They joined the force together, trained in the same academy, rose through the ranks side by side, and share a hardline view of social order stability, often code for silencing people of color. Hayes bristled at the news that Jolie Bennett was back and leading an internal probe. He hadn't forgotten her public questioning 3 years earlier, when footage of him baton striking a bound youth went viral. As a newly appointed special supervisor, Jolie nearly cost him his position. Had Edward Sinclair not intervened at the last moment, he chose not to attack head-on. Instead, he filed an official request with the FBI to limit intervention in local internal affairs, and spread rumors that Jolie was using her power for personal vendettas, lacking objectivity. Low-tier media outlets began referring to her with mocking tones. A single slap becomes a national crisis. In a closed-door meeting between federal and state police representatives, Hayes taunted, "The FBI's acting like tabloid journalism, turning a slap into a national issue. One day, the public will tire of your self-righteousness." Sarah Mitchell couldn't hold back. She turned on Hayes with contempt clear in her eyes. "People are tired of silence. We're tired of those who think their badge grants them the right to trample others." Jolie remained silent, exactly what Hayes wanted, hoping to drag her into an emotional confrontation and force her hand too soon. When he got no reaction from Jolie, Hayes shifted tactics. He sent an envoy to warn Mintran to keep his distance from Agent Bennett or risk unexpected system audits and technical errors, freezing his internal accounts. But Min didn't back down. He immediately installed counter-espionage software and began logging every data packet sent from Hayes's IP. Soon after, Jolie received an extract of the Rapid Response Team's deployment orders. She scrutinized each entry, pausing on dates when Keller's units swept through predominantly black neighborhoods. Each time, the team was deployed hours in advance, enough to accidentally escalate pressure and justify the ensuing violence, all signed off by Marcus Hayes without delay. Jolie picked up her pen and jotted a special code note in her private log. Marcus Hayes not only shields Keller, he directs the violence. If Keller is the blade, Hayes is the hand that wields it. This story had become more than punishing a rogue officer. It was a confrontation with an organized system where every link is stained with blood yet wears a legitimate badge. Jolie knew that to shatter its core, she couldn't afford a single misstep. The atmosphere inside the Ridgepoint Police Department had shifted. Gone were the polite nods, the cursory greetings, and the respectful glances from the day Jolie first appeared. Instead, there was coldness, silence, and scrutinizing looks, as if they wanted to strip her bare of every rank and every badge. In a place where the FBI's reputation and badges once opened all doors, they now made those inside want to slam every door shut. Jolie said nothing. She was used to being a target, but this time it wasn't because of her position. It was because she dared to touch what others chose to ignore, the system, and the system knew how to protect itself, even by the dirtiest means. That evening, in the temporary office on the 3rd floor, she received a file sent from the Internal Affairs Department. The documents weren't important, just a few rotation assignment minutes. But when she flipped to the 3rd page, a small piece of paper fell out, folded in half, no name, no sign, only a short line written in neat, slanted black ink handwriting. To keep the life of the one you love, sometimes you must know when to let go. She stared at the line for a long time, showing no emotion. Then she folded it back, tucked the paper into her jacket pocket, and stood up, heading straight to the Internal Security Operations Room. Jolie didn't tell Sarah, nor did she message Min. She knew whoever sent such a threat left no clear traces, but she needed confirmation. Who entered her room, and when? The result, nothing. The camera data during that time frame had been deleted. No system error reported, no intrusion alarm, simply vanished. Too perfect to be a coincidence. Min learned about it a few hours later. Without waiting for Jolie's order, he quietly checked the hidden backup system. The auxiliary log showed a mobile device had accessed the internal security floor using a network outside the FBI. The time matched exactly when Jolie received the document. Meanwhile, local police colleagues began changing their attitudes. Jolie's requested files were said to be sent with old versions. Responses were delayed, meetings postponed due to overlapping operational schedules. An officer who was usually quite friendly suddenly became curt, reminding her to focus on federal matters. Don't meddle in internal affairs. The climax was when Jolie passed the parking lot. A young officer standing by a patrol car glanced sideways and sneered, "Who do you think you are to dig through this station?" Jolie stopped and turned. Her eyes were as sharp as a blade. Someone you should start worrying about if you're not clean. No shouting, no more words. The officer took half a step back and turned away. She walked on, but inside a terrifying clarity arose. This was no longer about disciplining one individual. This was about poking into a web that had been spun tightly over an entire system, where every silent hand was holding that of a perpetrator. Back at the office, Jolie opened a drawer, took out the Glock at her hip, and checked the ammunition. Everything was intact, clean, and ready. The coming battle would not be fought only with files, data, or cold meetings under fluorescent lights. It would be a war she could not face empty-handed. Sarah frowned as she skimmed through unusually encrypted internal emails. Not the deep-level encryption usually found in federal security communications, but a kind of semi-official code using vague abbreviations embedded in dry official language. Decoding the layer, she found what made her heart sink: Jolie's schedule, including meeting times, travel routes, even the name of the hotel where she was staying temporarily. "Someone is tracking her every step," Sarah muttered. re-encrypting all suspicious phrases. Each confirmation line, every time it matched Jolie's movements in the past week, made her throat tighten. This was no longer a leak. This was a system. At the same time, Min in the security data room cross-referenced the rapid response team's patrol map with Jolie's work schedule. The data overlapped almost perfectly at 3 points: near the local press headquarters, a disputed African-American residential area, and an old meeting point of witness Darnell Whitmore. In all 3 cases, Marcus Hayes's team was present 1 to 2 hours earlier, even without an official assignment. The surveillance plan is well organized, Min said as he sent the report to Sarah and Jolie. It's not on the duty roster. It's on a hidden schedule. That night, as Jolie sat alone in the office, the landline rang. No one called that number after 8 p.m. except Sarah. But the voice on the line was not Sarah's. It was a man's voice, deep and cold, speaking briefly in a steady tone like a death sentence. Remember, not everyone gets to rest in an FBI uniform. Without waiting for Jolie's response, he hung up. Jolie was not shaken. She simply held the phone, put it down as if she had just received a normal message. Then she turned to Sarah and Min, who had returned to the shared office, and ordered the installation of anti-surveillance devices and a thorough check of all mobile devices, microphones, cameras, USBs, earphones, and access cards. She left no gap open. Tension escalated when Jolie was summoned to attend an internal FBI meeting. A council member, one previously supported by Hayes in a seat contest last year, spoke up. You're stirring internal chaos, a wrongful arrest, and you turn it into a purge campaign. Jolie stared at him unblinking. I'm not the one changing things. You've let it fester too long without action. I'm just cutting through the rot. The atmosphere in the room froze. No one said another word. Shortly after, Min sent Jolie a strange code string recurring in internal emails that Sarah discovered. It was a covert symbol used by the rapid response team to evade supervision, a kind of internal action password, allowing them to adjust positions without official reporting. Jolie knew this was the first proof of a high-level manipulation network. She opened her laptop and wrote the first report, but did not send it immediately. The file was encrypted and named First Layer Breach. In it, she documented an organized internal protection system with FBI data access and signs of cover-up for violent acts, coordinated by Keller and Hayes. After saving, Jolie sat silently looking out the window. Outside, flashing vehicle lights blinked on the busy street. Sirens sounded at a nearby intersection. She recalled Keller's voice when he shoved her on the street. Order requires silence. Jolie smiled faintly, barely audible to herself, then whispered as if answering the darkness, justice requires noise. Beneath the basement of the downtown complex, dim yellow lights cast shadows over the stained concrete patches. The smell of gasoline and burnt rubber lingered in the air. Sarah drove the dark gray SUV into the parking lot, braking sharply beside a pillar. Before the engine could even be turned off, she jumped out, opened the passenger door, and pulled Jolie out. With worried eyes, but without a word of complaint, the blood on Jolie's forehead had dried into a brownish, burly streak, her shoulder torn, revealing a long red bruise. Sarah opened the trunk, pulled out a first aid kit. She used a cold cloth to clean the wound, her movements firm but decisive. Jolie did not resist, nor did she groan. She leaned back against the car window, her gaze fixed on the darkness enveloping the basement as if reading something from the void. Not everyone gets to rest in an FBI suit. The words echoed in Jolie's mind, not for the first time, but this time they struck deeper. No longer a warning, no longer cheap threats. This was a declaration of war, and the sender knew exactly whom they targeted. Sarah tightened the bandage around Jolie's shoulder, then plopped down into the back seat, breathing heavily. You should pull back for now. This is no longer just an investigation. Let Min and me handle the rest. Jolie shook her head, softly but firmly. If I pull back, they'll think violence is the only language that matters. Her voice was hoarse but resolute, like a stone balancing in a storm. At the same time, Min sent an encrypted signal from headquarters. While Jolie was ambushed, he quietly accessed the city traffic system, identifying vehicles leaving the warehouse area during the most dangerous time window. One license plate stood out, an unregistered black SUV, previously spotted at a political event 2 years ago. Min traced the driver's identity, a former bodyguard for an extremist lobbying group, with photos standing beside Sinclair at a closed speech in a southern state. Jolie reopened her jacket pocket and took out a piece of paper she had carefully hidden, the only thing she managed to grab when fleeing the warehouse. The paper was torn, a blood-stained corner, but 3 words remained clear. Civilian disappeared. Sarah skimmed the note, then looked at Jolie. Could be a threat. Jolie shook her head. No, this is a dossier. People who had filed complaints against Keller, many suddenly withdrew their petitions. Then they disappeared from their registered addresses, medical records, even tax files. She pulled out a notebook and wrote a brief line. They don't just erase evidence, they erase people. No one said more. Only the sound of a fan from the upper floor drifted down, mingling with flickering light from a dying fluorescent bulb. Inside the car, Sarah rested her head on the seat back, eyes closed. Jolie sat still, staring at the distant flashing light, then whispered, as if speaking to herself, "If I stop, who will be the next to disappear?" Outside the car, the city still lived, noisy and bright with skyscrapers and billboards. But in this basement, only 2 people remained, one determination and one truth being torn apart layer by layer. The federal investigation room was silent, lit only by the pale blue light from the screen reflecting on the tense faces of Jolie and Nin. No one spoke much, focusing entirely on the data just recovered from the old hard drive of the city police department. Min's self-developed software was gradually reconstructing files that had been deliberately edited or deleted. A file popped up on the screen. Jolie zoomed in. It was a complaint filed by a black citizen named Marcus Hill, accusing Keller of unlawful beating during an arrest 3 years ago. What made Jolie pause was not the complaint itself, but the last line. Complaint dismissed, insufficient grounds for investigation. Judge Edward Sinclair. Sinclair? Jolie frowned. The name was familiar, but she did not expect it to be linked to Keller. "Let me check further," Min said, fingers tapping rapidly. In less than 5 minutes, Min listed 6 separate cases, all involving Keller and all dismissed by the same judge, Edward Sinclair. "His notes are oddly identical," Min observed. "Cold, technical language, but I'm certain it's a template, not his personal writing style." Sarah stood nearby, arms crossed. A judge can't intervene administratively this often without raising suspicion. Something's off. Jolie nodded slowly. She knew Sinclair was notorious for being a tough, conservative judge who always cited the law to fend off criticism about discrimination. Yet these dismissal files revealed blatant bias. Not a single case was investigated, despite clear witnesses and evidence. "Follow the money," Jolie instructed. Min didn't hesitate. He started tracing finances related to Sinclair, not through his main accounts, but via relative. Then he stopped, pointing at the screen. "This is Sinclair's maternal cousin. In the past 2 years, she received 3 transfers from law firms that had defended Keller in civil suits." Jolie stared at the confirmation line. It was not a surprise, but confirmation of her long-held suspicion. Keller was protected, and the one behind it was a judge. "If Sinclair is the patron, he's not just protecting Keller," Jolie said. "He's protecting himself and the system he serves." Sarah sighed. "This goes beyond a rogue cop." Jolie remained silent. She printed a copy of Marcus Hill's file, marked the 6 dismissed cases, and saved all images related to the Sinclair family's financial flow. Preparing to send a report to the federal director, she paused before confirming, "I want to keep a copy." Jolie whispered, "In case someone above doesn't want this to proceed." She stood and walked to the far wall, where portraits of senior judges awarded official medals hung. Sinclair's photo hung in the center. Stern face, cold eyes. Jolie stared, and then added a simple note to her file. "This network has a judge protector. Who else is behind it?" When the gold-embossed invitation card arrived at the federal office, Jolie immediately sensed something. was Ong. The event was held under the name Honoring Those Who Contributed to the National Judiciary, but among guests, Edward Sinclair's name stood out, proof of untouchable power. No one explained why Jolie was invited, but she knew. This was not an honor, but a soft trap. "We can't miss this," Sarah said, seeing the invitation. "If he's confident enough to attend, something will be revealed." That evening, in the grand hall of Crystal Manor Hotel, lit by crystal chandeliers shining on evening gowns and neat suits, Jolie appeared calm. She was accompanied by Sarah, not just as a companion, but as a shadow ready to support. Sinclair stood near the band, chatting with a small group. Jolie recognized Deputy Police Chief Harlan, previously been investigated for covering up Keller's excessive force. The group kept a safe distance from outsiders, exchanging nods, knowing looks, and faint smiles. Jolie did not approach. She wore a small earpiece, receiving signals from Min, stationed at the FBI office, connected to surveillance of a recovered audio recording. "Are you listening?" Min's voice came softly. The recording played, Keller's voice clear. "Without Sinclair backing me, I would have lost my badge long ago." Jolie froze near the corridor leading to the restroom. An idea sparked. She walked quickly, then stopped at a junction where Sinclair walked alone. They faced each other briefly. Jolie said evenly, "Have you thoroughly read the victim files and complaints against Keller?" Sinclair showed no surprise, not even asking who Jolie was. He replied with unwavering eyes, "Not every cry is justice. Sometimes social stability is more important than a few petty cases." His answer was like a slash to the concept of fairness, not denial, but chilling indifference. Jolie said nothing. She bowed her head slightly and turned away, but in her mind, the pieces began to form. Back at headquarters, Jolie opened internal files, wrote a preliminary report, classified Sinclair as suspected judicial manipulation, and proposed a separate investigation into judgments he approved over the past 5 years. No press, no announcement, just quietly enough to make the state's most powerful judge aware of scrutiny. In her office, Jolie stood before a whiteboard showing a connection diagram. From Keller to Sinclair was a thick, solid line, but behind Sinclair no specific name yet. She took a pen and wrote an empty box with a large question mark. Who is really funding this? Putting down the pen, Jolie realized she faced not just corruption, but a power ecosystem. To sever it required more than evidence. It needed unshakable trust. Jolie sat in the internal briefing room with Sarah and Min. The whiteboard was plastered with relationship diagrams, money flow charts, and excerpts from complaint files. Each detail a piece of the truth they were about to expose. She held a thin document folder, her eyes fixed on the bolded title on the cover. Summary of Enforcement Violations, Keller and Direct Associates. "We'll split into 3 lines of action," Jolie said, calmly but decisively. "Min will handle data encryption, splitting it across backup drives. Sarah will coordinate with our attorney, preparing responsive legal documents. And I'll draft the press statement for independent media." She didn't need to spell it out. The 3 of them understood. Once released, this would be no mere investigation, but a battle of words, politics, and survival. Sarah exhaled as she reviewed every phrase in the report. Not a single word can be wrong. If we leave a gap, they'll use it against us. Min, seated before 3 monitors, silently ran security system simulations. A red icon blinked in the corner, causing him to pause. Someone was scanning system ports. Not in yet, but probing. "Jolie," he said, "someone's trying to check our activity. They haven't got in, but it's definitely not internal testing." Jolie was unsurprised. Over the past 3 days, she'd received more than 7 anonymous calls. Some warnings, a few light threats, and others hinting that her actions were damaging the FBI's image. A longtime colleague even messaged privately, "You're making yourself a target. One step back, and you can still win." But she knew retreat now meant abandoning everything. They agreed not to release all the evidence at once. Instead, the team would first publish proof of record tampering, those seemingly innocent administrative errors that, if disclosed artfully, would ignite public outrage. The first strike would be a probe, a slap hard enough to force their opponents into the open. Min quietly installed a hidden webcam behind a framed picture in the investigation room. Last night the door had been tampered with, insufficient force to break in, but enough to send a message. Before leaving, he wrote on the whiteboard, "They accessed us, but they couldn't take anything. The question is, what did they find?" Jolie read the note, her gaze sharpening. She stood, gathering all backup drives and report copies, carefully placing them into 3 separate bags. "From now on," she said, "no one carries more than one data segment." She understood, when the truth emerges, the strongest aren't those with weapons, but those who survive the storm without losing their bearings. A copy of the report dismissing Keller's complaint, signed by Judge Edward Sinclair, was sent to 3 independent regional news outlets. It happened in absolute silence. No press release, no note, just sealed envelopes stamped, "If justice is a game, watch what the lawyers do." Jolie penned that line herself, and only 2 others knew, Sarah and Min. That evening, in the office, as the 3 reviewed data for the next release, Sarah received an unidentified call. A man's deep, clear voice recited an internal file code known only to them. "FI 215, Delta 9. We've read it, and we're watching." Sarah stiffened. Min unplugged the phone, traced the IP, and within 3 hours he located the source at a state-level law firm once known to defend units tied to Sinclair. But when he called to verify, the reply was icy. "This office closed 3 months ago." Jolie said nothing, signaling Min to review nearby security footage. He accessed the hidden webcam in Jolie's office. Morning footage looping staff entries until 11:42. A man in a FedEx uniform stepped in, left nothing, took nothing, stood for 47 seconds facing Jolie's bookshelf, then walked out. No one saw his face. No one remembered any delivery. "They don't need to take it. They just need to know what we have," Jolie said quietly. She walked to the shelf, retrieved a document secured with dual-layer encryption, and returned it to a small safe. "They know what we hold, but not what we'll release first," Min asked. "So what's first?" Jolie answered without hesitation. "Keep Merrick's files for last. Anything linked to him goes out at the end, when they won't know what hit them." Sarah nodded, though anxiety showed in her eyes. Then she checked her phone and gasped, "Jolie." An anonymous message arrived. No text, only a photo. Jolie's mother shopping in a neighborhood thousands of miles away. No police nearby, no one in their group had shared family details. Below the image was a simple code string, which Min's software decoded almost instantly. "We're closer than you think." Sarah handed the phone to Jolie. Jolie studied the photo long and hard, then turned to Min. "Erase all my personal location history from every system." Min nodded. No one spoke further, but in their eyes one thing was clear: the game was no longer within their control. In recent days, Jolie began noticing strange signs. Certain details from her top-secret files, information she'd never shared publicly, suddenly appeared in the media. A right-wing news outlet even reported exactly when she left headquarters on Tuesday morning, data that could only have come from inside. Sarah and Min compiled a list of everyone with access to those high-level records. No one was more suspicious than Mark Delroy, a veteran FBI agent who'd worked alongside Jolie from the start. Mark was capable, discreet, and trusted by Jolie almost implicitly. He had once saved her life during a Philadelphia operation. Precisely because he was so low profile, Mark slipped through every security check. During a random audit, Min discovered an internal ID had accessed the folder containing the original recording of Keller and Sinclair's call. Only Jolie, Min, and Sarah knew where that file was stored. Sarah immediately called an urgent meeting. In the small room were only Jolie, Min, and Sarah. No one spoke loudly. They knew every word now had to be backed by evidence. Min traced the IP used to download the file and matched it with internal camera footage. The access occurred at 2:36 a.m., and the video showed that Mark Delroy was the only person entering the server room at that time. He didn't look at the camera, walked briskly with his hands in his pockets, but that very composure felt like a confession. Jolie sat in silence for 10 minutes, staring at the screen. her eyes frozen. The betrayal seeped into her heart, not by an enemy, but by someone who once stood beside her in a hail of bullets. Sarah sighed. Should we summon him now? Jolie replied softly but firmly, no. Over the next few hours, they covertly monitored Mark's activity. Min set up a hidden alert for any access by Mark's ID to Keller documents, and, as predicted, Mark attempted to send data to an encrypted email address outside the FBI system. A few days later, armed with irrefutable proof, Jolie called Mark into a closed meeting. She neither shouted nor threatened. She simply placed before him a printout of the entire access history, the camera stills, and a clip of the internal recording. Mark, we were teammates, she said. What hurts most isn't your betrayal, but that you made me doubt everyone else. Mark did not deny it. His face was calm as ever, yet his hand trembled. I had no choice, he admitted. They have my family. If I didn't... Jolie cut him off. You could have told me. I could have helped, but you chose silence. The meeting ended, with Mark Delroy's immediates suspended, and all evidence was forwarded to the federal inspector. Yet for Jolie, the hardest wound to mend was the fracture in trust. She knew from that moment on her battle was no longer just about unmasking an enemy. It was about facing the scars inflicted from behind. Mark's suspension cast a chill over Jolie's FBI team. No one spoke openly, but every glance, every step, every nod carried newfound suspicion. Sarah masked her frustration to keep control. Min scarcely left his console, continuously reviewing logs for any other anomalies. But the hardest task wasn't tracing footprints. It was repairing fractured trust. Once lively meetings grew silent, white team members began distancing themselves. Whispers in the break room branded Jolie too extreme, accusing her of turning an administrative matter into an internal witch hunt. An anonymous email arrived at headquarters stating, she's dragging the whole team into a pit, driven by personal vendettas. Jolie Bennett is using the FBI as her revenge tool. Though unsigned, the phrasing and internal jargon revealed it was no outsider. Jolie realized she was battling not just external foes, but preserving her own ranks. She called an impromptu closed-door meeting. As everyone entered, Jolie stood before a whiteboard. No documents, no slides. Only one question. If the truth makes you uncomfortable, are we still on the right side? She didn't raise her voice or defend herself. She simply said, I'm not asking anyone to follow me to the end. I only remind you, we swore under this flag never to abandon the truth, even when it costs us. No one answered immediately, yet in a few eyes something softened. Outside, the pressure didn't ease. Mark, though suspendee, remained at large, having fled the city. Threatening emails continued, aimed not only at Jolie but at Sarah, Min, and 2 other team members. Min proposed setting up an independent surveillance network outside the FBI system, suspecting someone was tampering with internal monitoring. Sarah agreed bluntly. The traitor on the team is only a pawn. The mastermind remains hidden. Jolie sighed. She knew they were right, but she also knew that if they kept flipping pawns one by one, they'd never reach the hand actually moving the pieces. At the end, Jolie stood by the 20th floor window, looking out over the city. Below, people went about their lives, unaware that a single wrong decision, a single moment of hesitation, could shatter justice into darkness. She pulled out her phone and texted the federal director, I need extended investigative authority. Bypass the local office. Then she turned back to the team behind the frosted glass, hand over her heart. No words were spoken, but in her mind rang a clear vow. Those who defy the law will pay their price. The Morning Ledger newsroom, located in the city center, was packed with strangers that morning. Cameras swiveled around the entrance. Spotlights shone directly on the makeshift podium erected in less than 3 hours. Jolie chose this place not for its luxury, but for its reputation and independence in investigative journalism. Sarah and Min arrived early, checking the entire sound system, cameras, and live stream connection to ensure no strange signals or spy devices were planted. They knew that after what Jolie was about to reveal, any interference could be a fatal blow. The atmosphere inside the press conference room was like a compressed storm waiting to erupt. Journalists came from all over. On social media, news that FBI agent Jolie Bennett would expose evidence involving a corruption network, including police and judiciary, sparked fierce controversy. Her name hashtags appeared densely. Many support her, but also skeptical, mocking posts claiming this was just a ploy to justify recent scandals. Jolie stepped out in a minimalist suit, simple but sharp. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried an undeniable sharpness. She did not read from a script nor give a long speech. With a steady voice, she introduced herself and opened her personal laptop, connected directly to the large screen behind her. Before the public, Jolie played a recording between Keller and a subordinate officer, where Keller admitted he was backed by a superior who could erase all complaints. She then presented financial statements pointing out money transfers from a friendly law firm to the account of Judge Edward Sinclair's cousin. Next came testimonies from victims who had been beaten and silenced. Now willing to show their faces, trusting today's transparency, the press room exploded with rapid-fire questions. Who was behind these transactions? Why hadn't the Department of Justice acted sooner? Were there other high-ranking officials involved? Jolie did not evade. She made no promises, only emphasized that all evidence had been sent to the federal secure system, and if she was harmed, the data would automatically be released again through multiple channels. We live in a society where justice is not always present in courtrooms, Jolie said firmly. When justice is distorted by power, the truth must be shouted at all costs. Her hashtag, written without accents, spread across social media platforms. A video clip of her speech, under 10 minutes, surpassed millions of views within the first hour. International media began covering the story. Meanwhile, those in the shadows, the ones exposed, started moving. This was just the beginning. Less than an hour after the press conference, a wave of reaction spread exactly as Jolie had predicted, and more fiercely than expected. Numerous articles simultaneously appeared in government-aligned newspapers, from the right wing to major media outlets, usually avoiding sensitive issues. The headlines did not directly attack Jolie, but the word choices were highly suggestive. An inside smear campaign. When an FBI agent oversteps authority and speaks reckless, who really stands behind this justice play? Soon after, both William Keller and Judge Edward Sinclair issued responses. Keller, in a video posted by his lawyer, appeared calm, but with visible anger. "I am being framed. Those recordings have clearly been edited. This is a deliberate retaliation." Sinclair, usually reticent, gave an exclusive interview to a national TV channel. He emphasized, "We are witnessing an effort to undermine the legal system by sowing doubt, and I believe the truth will be restored." Though Jolie had anticipated this, the chain reaction left clear consequences. Inside the FBI, some who had once greeted her warmly now quietly turned their backs. Some even openly stated on personal social media that she was disrupting an already overburdened system. Whispers spread through the headquarters corridors. Many files she had accessed were temporarily locked for reassessment of access rights. She was removed from some internal channels. No one said it openly, but the message was clear. Sarah tried to stay calm, but Min could not hide his worry. While inspecting Jolie's car that afternoon, he discovered a small device attached under the chassis. It was a GPS tracker, not FBI property. The signal was simply encrypted, enough to send the current location but not to trace back the installer. The three of them fell silent for a moment after hearing the click when Min removed the device. "They've started playing dirty," Min whispered, eyes scanning the underground parking lot. Not just fake news, but real dirty tricks. Later, Jolie sat in a cramped meeting room, convening an independent investigation team, including people she trusted who had worked with her on cross-state cases. She demanded that no information be released through official bureau systems. All communication switched to external encryption and manual contact. She wanted this team to trace the financial routes that she and Min had uncovered, to find out who was truly orchestrating the money flows that obscured the main players. That night, when Jolie returned to her 8th-floor apartment, the hallway lights were still on as usual, but the darkness in her heart was thicker than ever before. On the mat by her door lay a cream-colored envelope without a postal stamp or sender's name. Inside was only a single white piece of paper with bold printing centered. "Don't forget the price of those who make others afraid." Jolie held the paper, standing there for a long moment. No expression, no words, but after closing the door, she didn't throw the paper into the trash. She slipped it into the red document drawer, where she kept all threats received throughout the investigation. Strangely, they did not scare her. They only reminded her she was on the right path. After Jolie Bennett released evidence that shook the entire local police and judicial system, the reaction from Keller and his accomplices did not come through the law, but from the shadows. In less than 48 hours after the shocking press conference, a series of obscure articles simultaneously appeared in tabloids. Headlines hinted ambiguously, like FBI Director Female Warrior or Manipulator and Jolie Bennett's unusual career advancement. Social media exploded with cleverly edited videos, Jolie fiercely arguing in a muted meeting, overlaid with a strange voice uttering derogatory phrases about subordinates. Crude comments appeared densely, mostly from fake accounts activated simultaneously, a coordinated smear campaign. Public opinion began to split. Some supporters of Jolie felt doubtful. Those who never knew her started questioning. Mainstream media was dragged into the whirlwind, forced to report to balance public information. Under public pressure, the Ministry of Interior temporarily summoned Jolie to re-verify her role in directing the investigation. Although the check was formal, in the media, it felt like a blow to her honor. Meanwhile, the real threat occurred behind the scenes. An underground organization supporting Keller hired hackers to attack the FBI's internal security system. Min Tran, cybersecurity technician and Jolie's closest friend, was the first to detect it. He warned, "They don't just want to ruin your reputation. They're trying to physically get to you. Home data, movement routes, they've got them all." At the same time, an anonymous email was sent to Jolie's personal inbox. No explicit threats, just a photo of her mother shopping in another state, with the note, "Be careful with what you know." Sarah Mitchell immediately set up a temporary protection team around Jolie, consisting of the most trusted teammates, but both she and Min understood this was no longer a legal battle. This was war. The enemy no longer hid behind paperwork. They were out on the streets with real guns and lethal intent. Jolie did not flinch. But that night, looking up at the ceiling, she clearly felt for the first time what she had always tried to ignore. The helplessness when those you love are endangered simply because you chose the right path. She did not regret it, but she began to fear, not for herself, but for her mother, for Min, for Sarah. The next morning, as Jolie stepped out of her gate to attend an internal hearing, a sharp click sound rang out. Everything happened in less than a second. Sarah's scream echoed behind. Min, standing a few steps away, rushed forward instinctively. A strong push from the side made Jolie lean, then she felt a heavy object collapse beside her. Blood spread rapidly onto the sidewalk. Min lay motionless, a bullet lodged in his lower left abdomen. His eyes were wide open, but his gaze was not panicked. He grasped Jolie's hand, struggling to utter each word through choking pain. "Don't stop. You understand?" A chilling moment of silence. Jolie squeezed his hand tightly, expression blank. But in those eyes, the fire was no longer anger. It was an execution order. At that moment, she knew. This was no longer a court matter. This was a purge, and she would not step back 1 inch. The wail of ambulances tore through the peaceful morning, echoing down the street like a drum beating in Jolie's chest. Min was rushed directly into surgery, blood soaking his shirt, spreading across the stretcher sheets, glaringly red and cold. The doctor said little, nodding briefly. "We'll do everything we can, but the condition is critical." Jolie sat silently on the hospital corridor bench, hands clenched white. Sarah approached, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, but Jolie did not respond. She stared straight at the closed operating room door, eyes drained of color, expressionless, unpanicked, only a strange emptiness, chilling to the bone. In that silence, a memory surfaced. When Min first entered Jolie's office 3 years ago, he was a young Asian man with a slight build, soft voice, but a determined gaze. "I believe no system is strong if its smallest links start pretending not to see what's wrong." That sentence made Jolie keep Min, not for experience, but for that spirit. She never thought the quiet technician would one day stand before a gun for her, not for position, not for orders, but for belief. While Jolie waited, local police were summoned to the attack scene, but instead of a thorough investigation, they preliminarily concluded it could be a failed robbery and quickly closed the case. No one mentioned Keller's name. No one mentioned the chain of threats. Sarah was furious, pounding her hand on the local chief's desk, shouting straight at him, "Are you going to wait until my people die before starting a proper investigation?" That same night, Jolie signed an internal order, without court board approval. She officially reopened all files related to Keller and traced suspicious financial accounts linked to his support network. The internal data system shook. Supervisory unit, the long sile, began to move. Information about the assassination leaked to the press within hours, but instead of blaming Jolie, public outrage grew against the system that had sheltered men like Keller too long. Numerous articles and posts spread images of Min falling. No name, no medals, just a person believing in right and wrong. That evening, Jolie appeared on national television. She did not speak about herself. No defense. No mention of slander or gossip. She just looked straight into the camera and asked, "Why must one risk their life to shield justice?" That question needed no answer. It spread like wildfire across dry grass. People began questioning the very system they lived and worked in. Conversations settled thoughts, flared up again, and this time the public was no longer indifferent. Near dawn, Jolie still had not slept. She stood by the hospital window where Min lay. His heartbeat on the monitor was stable, but those eyes remained closed tightly. A nurse passed by softly, saying, "He's fighting." Jolie nodded gently. No reply. In her hand was a phone, replaying an old recording from Keller's own mouth, low and scornful. "If it dares to open its mouth, I'll make it disappear." Jolie stopped the recording, eyes slowly turning toward the pale sunlight outside the window. She whispered as a declaration, not to Keller, but to the system that had protected him all this time. "Now it's my turn." Data decrypted from the federal financial system was sent directly to Jolie's temporary office. She sat silently at her desk, warm yellow light casting over documents, charts, and numerous unusual transfer lines. Sarah sat opposite, eyes fixed on the computer screen where a complex financial diagram gradually took shape. "There's a large sum flowing steadily every quarter into an investment fund called Arcturus Group," Sarah said in a low voice. "Not a normal company. Office based in D.C., no clear business registration, no public shareholders." Jolie zoomed in on the name of the CEO, Charles Merrick. The name was familiar. Merrick was once a senior advisor at the Department of Justice, appearing faintly in administrative records but never front and center. He was discreet, scandal-free, and absent from public view, a perfect shadow. Yet the money flows from Merrick were the key links connecting Keller, Sinclair, and a chain of controversial policies spanning nearly a decade. Jolie lifted a stack of decrypted emails. They contained exchanges between Merrick and Sinclair, instructions on handling investigation files, indirect interference in cases with strategic interest factors. Behind the vague wording lay decisions that buried many abuse of power cases, not due to lack of evidence, but because certain people must not be touched. She inhaled deeply, tapping her fingers on the desk. "Keller is just a pawn. Sinclair holds the strings. Merrick is the player." An internal meeting was held that very night. Jolie presented to Sarah and 2 financial experts she trusted absolutely. On the screen was the new power diagram. From illegal money transfers, leaked emails, to secret meetings with system logs, but deleted content files. Sarah frowned at the diagram. If Merrick is involved, the entire system is running in his hands. Not just courts, not just police, media, and top-level policy too. Jolie didn't blink, her voice steady and cold. This isn't a trial. It's a campaign. They sat silently for a long while. Outside the glass window, city lights dimmed behind the late-night mist. The night was so quiet that the ticking of the clock was clear, but no one counted time anymore. Jolie stood, took out her personal phone, and sent a message to an independent agent operating in Maryland, a specialist in high-level money laundering investigations. The message was just 3 lines. Off-system contact. Investigate Arcturus Group. Absolute anonymity. She turned to Sarah. From now on, all communication about Merrick goes through detours. No email, no server, no internal meetings. We work as if being watched, because I'm sure we are. Sarah nodded, her eyes turning cold. Jolie folded the documents carefully into a locked leather bag. The first evidence of a force far beyond Sinclair had appeared, and she knew the opponent ahead wielded not only power, but the ability to turn truth into lies protected by law. Leaving the room, Jolie said only one sentence. The game just changed the rules, and this time, I choose the board. At dawn, the city lay beneath a thin mist, blurring silent buildings. Jolie left the internal meeting, burdened not just by new data on Merrick, but by the feeling that everything was drifting beyond the bounds of a criminal investigation. Relationship maps, financial accounts, encrypted emails were no longer mere evidence. They were kindling for a silent, yet brutal war. Her phone vibrated. A message from the hospital. Min Tran has regained consciousness. Without hesitation, Jolie rushed to her car, started it, and sped through empty streets. The cold wind blowing through the window did not clear her mind. Her thoughts raced faster than her hands on the wheel. Entering the hospital room, she saw Min lying pale, eyes half closed. She approached, trembling slightly as she placed her hand on his thin one. That hand had scrawled through thousands of lines of code, drawn the most complex security diagrams. Now it was recovering after a bullet that never aimed for it. "I'm here," she whispered softly. Min opened his eyes. His first glance passed over Jolie's face, then lit with a weak smile. Both joyful and resolute. He whispered just one sentence. "Are we winning?" Jolie paused and then smiled. Not a hearty smile, but a faint one, light as the early winter wind, yet carrying warmth. "We're making them afraid." In the soft hospital light, their conversation was brief. No need for many words. Min asked about Sarah, the investigation progress, and what he had missed. Jolie recounted everything gently, as if speaking to someone recovering from a storm. Their bond needed no dramatic language. A single look was enough to understand. They would not quit, not for anyone, but for all. But peace was short-lived. As Jolie left the hospital room to answer her phone, a call came directly from Washington. On the other end was a cold, precise, middle-aged male voice, with the tone of someone who does not explain. "Director Bennett, we require you to suspend all investigations related to Charles Merrick. This is an order from the Department of Homeland Security. The case involves a national security program. We will take over from here." Jolie was silent. She didn't ask why or argue. She replied simply, "Understood," then hung up. Back in the hospital corridor, Sarah was waiting. Without a word, she handed Jolie a small piece of paper, a code snippet. Below was a handwritten line, unsigned, "Don't go alone. They don't play by the rules." Jolie folded the paper, put it in her pocket, and then turned to the window at the end of the corridor, looking out. The hospital lights remained calm, warm like candlelight. But outside the city was suspiciously quiet. No sirens, no footsteps, only thick darkness. She took out an internal recording device, activated security mode, and said, "We've gone too far to turn back. If it means risking reputation, position, or life, I still choose to expose the truth." No one answered her, but it was not meant to be heard. It was a pledge. Once again, Jolie knew she was facing not just a manipulator. She was stepping into a land where the law could not shine. But she would step in for men, for unheard victims, and for those who died without justice, calling their names. Inside, Min closed his eyes again, his heartbeat stabilizing. Outside, a battle waited to be named, in the real voice. Jolie had never imagined that the hardest blow would come not from the forces she was fighting, but from the very people wearing the same federal uniform. After deciding to press on with the Merrick investigation despite warnings from above, she received no public disciplinary response, but she felt the shift in every glance, every tone, every sideways step past her in the hallway. It was never the same again. In a closed meeting at the regional federal office, attended only by mid- and senior-level staff, a white male colleague spoke up calmly but pointedly. "We're being pushed into very dangerous territory. The Keller case was tense enough. Now dragging Merrick in? I just hope. This isn't personal under the guise of justice." No one met Jolie's eyes. She sat tall and silent, but she saw the subtle nods, an unspoken consensus like an underground stream bursting its banks. A few, too timid to speak, spread insinuations in the cafeteria and along corridors. "She's turning the FBI into a social campaign, definitely chasing points with activist groups. I hate bringing up race, but it's more complicated than we thought." Worse than open opposition was the silence. Former allies who'd sent midnight encouragements now offered only polite greetings, never a follow-up question. Small meetings omitted her name from the attendee list. Important reports went out with her in the final CC slot. Sarah noticed first. "They're isolating you," she whispered as they left the elevator. Jolie didn't reply. She knew. What stung most was realizing, for the first time in many years, that she was dragging the entire system into crisis. She remembered her early days at the FBI, a young black woman forced to work twice as hard, triple-check everything, and speak 10 times less. She'd thought reaching the top would change everything. Instead, standing at the pinnacle, the wind was colder than anywhere she'd known. Under that pressure, she hesitated for the first time. One night, alone in the office, she reopened the request to subpoena a key witness, Merrick's former aide. The file was complete, ready to send, but her finger froze over the submit button. Never before had Jolie wavered at the threshold of action. That night, in the silent meeting room, walls echoing no sound, she stared at the headline and asked herself, if I send it, how many will turn their backs? If I don't, how many will remain silenced? In the end, she closed the screen, neither deleting nor sending, just to be decided. As she left the office, her shadow stretched long down the corridor, heavier than any she'd cast as an investigator. Her stride remained straight, but her shoulders slumped, not from fatigue, but because her conviction was tilting. A small crack formed, not in the system, but within the belief of the woman who once declared, "Justice has no time for hesitation." Sarah, not one to anger easily, locked Jolie in her office that morning, arms crossed, and looked her squarely in the eye. "You're backing down," Sarah said bluntly. "I see it. You step back, sit still. You're not the woman who made a corrupt network tremble." Jolie met her gaze without resistance, exhaustion weighing in her eyes. After a moment, she sighed. "I'm tired. No lucky evidence. But if people willing to believe the truth is worth the cost." Sarah was silent, only nodding before leaving Jolie alone in the room, tightening around her faith. Jolie rose and walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the parking lot below, the small lives moving unaware. She recalled FBI Academy days. Every fitness test, every tactical exam was a battle against prejudice. People once told her a black woman here was wrong from the start. Yet she graduated top of her class and was fast-tracked into federal investigations. Now, occupying the highest position she'd dreamed of, she felt back at square one. Only now the obstacles were not outsiders, but faces that once pledged support. An internal leak investigation was launched against Jolie. A memo circulated to leadership. Director Bennett is temporarily suspended from Level 1 system access, pending inquiry into classified leaks. No proof needed. Suspicion alone was enough to turn them against her. Jolie stood in the lobby, beneath her name engraved on the honor roll just 2 years ago. She looked up at the plaque, then down at the cold marble floor. Silent disenfranchisement cutting deep like a dull blade. She left the closed meeting after an unfavorable vote, with no farewells. On the third-floor corridor, she saw Min, who had once taken a bullet for him, limping on crutches. He smiled as if nothing had happened, paused before her and said, "You taught me. Between noise and silence, listen to your conscience." Jolie said nothing, tears brimming. When Min quietly left, she remained, imprinting his words on her heart. That evening, Jolie returned to the office. On her desk lay the financial transaction report linking to Merrick, the very file she'd delayed for fear of losing more support. She stared at it as if asking, "What does holding back mean when I've already lost so much?" Finally, she picked up pen note hesitation, no tremor, and made a bold, decisive stroke. Her comeback had begun from the place she once thought would be her end. A gust of wind howled down the concrete corridor as Jolie Bennett stepped out of the aging building after a covert meeting with a witness. Night had fallen. Her phone signal dropped and her earpiece crackled. Unusual in an area under tight surveillance, a strange chill ran down her spine. Footsteps behind her quickened. Jolie spun around, but the pale yellow streetlight couldn't make out the faces of the two figures approaching. No badges, expressionless. Before she could draw her alert card, a muffled bang echoed in the distance, diverting their attention. A Matjack military SUV screeched around the corner and braked hard. The door flung open. A firm voice called out, "Agent Bennett, get in the vehicle." Without hesitation, she leapt inside as the two figures vanished into the darkness. Inside, the air was heavy yet safe. Across from her sat a man in senior uniform, his gaze sharp as if he'd already reviewed her files and psyche in an instant. "Colonel Raymond Chu," he introduced himself tersely. "I'm from the Pentagon's Domestic Intelligence Command. Yes, we know everything you're trying to expose." Jolie remained silent, still reeling from the ambush and the impeccably timed intervention, but his eyes showed no jest. Unlike the fake powers she'd met before, Raymond Chu exuded clarity and resolve, the sort of person accustomed to life and death decisions. The SUV delivered them to a secluded military facility outside the city, one not marked on public maps. Jolie was ushered into a secure briefing room where classified documents awaited. From here, her fight would no longer be solitary. Raymond slid a thick dossier toward her. "We've been tracking Sinclair for years, but he's too cunning, always manipulating from the shadows. Somehow, he controls both military and civilian security contracts, dragging an entire power network into the mire." Jolie flipped through pages of photos, call logs, and fund transfer records, all enough to rock the system. "Anywhere he surfaced now?" she asked, suspicion coloring her tone. "Because you've made it impossible for the system to ignore," Raymond replied. "Not everyone dares stand against the tide without bowing. You've shown those with any conscience that it's time to pick a side." For the first time in weeks of threats and betrayals, Jolie felt a lightness in her chest. It wasn't safe. She knew no place was truly safe in this war, but it was faith. A faith not born of subordinates or allies, but from someone who'd stared into the system's darkness and still advanced toward the light. "You're not alone anymore," Raymond said, reading her thoughts. "And if you're ready, we'll turn this entire chessboard upside down." Jolie glanced at the dossiers, her hand tightening, chin dipping, eyes steeled. For the first time, she sensed behind her not just the memory of a shove in a crowded street, but a system beginning to rise from the black mud, prepared to confront it. Over the next 2 hours, Jolie and Colonel Chu reviewed every document. The cold words revealed ties between Judge Sinclair and senior figures in the judiciary and defense, including several federal contracts canceled for lack of transparency. Each page was a tile in a vast mosaic of power, money, and manipulation. "You need to know this," Raymond said, handing her a photograph. "This is the person who erased all internal records on Keller for the past 4 years. The only one with that level of access." Jolie stared at the image, frozen. The FBI's Special Operations aide, Camden Pierce, once her official liaison, had strolled into her office bearing coffee and jokes. "Another day of drama, Chief?" He'd always seemed neutral, professional, and conspicuously silent at critical moments. "Impossible," Jolie whispered. He was the one auditing my Keller files. Raymond neither smiled nor nodded, just looked at her with the certainty that the most loyal often serve as darkness's right hand. I need direct access, Jolie said, her voice burning with anger for the first time. If he's the gatekeeper to everything Keller hid, then he's the living link, and he must not vanish like the others. Raymond nodded. You have 48 hours. After that, we'll deploy military measures if necessary. Jolie left the base before dawn. Instead of returning to headquarters, she stopped at a deserted cafe in the suburbs. In her hand, she scrolled through every internal call log and encrypted message, things once dismissed as routine. This time, she read them with the eyes of someone hunted from within. At 9:30 IEM, Jolie walked into headquarters. Camden sat at his desk, eyes on his screen, typing as usual. You're back? He asked, voice faltering. I heard. Min's case is still cold? Jolie stared at him, silent. She stepped forward and placed a printed dossier on his desk. In bold red letters, Access Logs L5 Protocol. Camden looked at the files, then at her. You know? He whispered, neither panicked nor remorseful, merely slow and almost regretful. How long? Jolie asked. 18 months, he replied. You know what? I thought you'd quit after that shove in the mall. Who'd have guessed? Too bad, Jolie said coldly. I stood back up. She pulled out her phone. Prepare the warrant. Activate the 4th floor office. Subject, Camden Pierce. Betrayal. Obstruction of a federal investigation. Accomplice to internal misconduct. As security escorted Camden out, his gaze stayed fixed on her, as if he wanted to say something, but Jolie turned away. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a faint smile, not from relief, but because the purge begins from within. The area map lay spread out across the meeting table, densely dotted with red pins marking critical locations. No one spoke. The room was thick with concentration, the dim, flickering light from the projector casting shadows on the walls that seemed to dance like the chaos they were about to plunge into. Jolie stood confidently at the head of the table, holding a laser pointer in one hand, her voice calm yet resolute as she addressed the team. We don't have time to waste. After the assassination and Camden's exposure, we know their exact routes. There are 3 primary targets, 3 simultaneous counterattacks, strikes designed so swiftly and coordinated that they won't have a chance to react. Sarah Mitchell sat beside Jolie, her eyes cold and calculating. In front of her lay thick files filled with documents detailing complex money transfers flowing through a web of shell companies, all linked to an offshore bank account controlled by an organization fronted by Sinclair. They used this account for money laundering, paying for services ranging from political protection and witness tampering to, most recently, hitmen, Sarah said bluntly. Jolie nodded and pointed her laser at the first board on the wall. Team 1 will handle internal data operations at the Department of Justice. This is where suppressed internal complaints and documents are stored. Sarah, you're leading this effort. Take Agent Grant, 2 technicians, and 1 investigator from Chu's side. Understood, Sarah replied without hesitation. Jolie then shifted her pointer to the second board. Team 2 is tasked with severing financial flows. Agent Lacey, alongside personnel from the military command, will remotely access the digital banking headquarters in Belize. They'll have roughly 40 minutes to disable all internal access and freeze the funds. Once the money is cut off, their operations will be thrown into disarray. The final board was reserved for Jolie herself, her gaze fixed on a photograph of a secluded villa in the suburbs, believed to be the site of a secret early-morning meeting between Sinclair and 2 unseen but powerful ministry-level manipulators. Team 3, I lead this one. Our target, capture Edward Sinclair and the other 2 before they have a chance to scatter. The meeting will be guarded, heavily armed, but they don't know we have the schedule. A hand rose hesitantly. A young female investigator from Internal Affairs, her voice trembling slightly, asked, May I ask, do we have authorization to proceed without federal judge approval? Jolie's reply was swift and firm. When the legal system is twisted to the point of murder to cover crimes, our duty is no longer to comply, but to correct. There was no debate, no vote. Everyone present understood the gravity. They were stepping into a war without mercy. The plan was meticulously divided. All personal communication devices were collected and replaced by triple encrypted military-grade headsets provided by Colonel Raymond Chu. The only communication channel would be remotely coordinated by Mintran, if he could recover and be ready in time. The clock on the wall showed 2:13 a.m. Less than 24 hours remained. As the team dispersed to prepare, Jolie remained alone, staring intently at the map, at every red mark, every name attached. Each represented a memory, a wound, a promise yet unfulfilled. In the deep silence of the night, she whispered to herself, "This time no villain will leave the courtroom in peace. No one else will fall because of silence." She set down her pen on the map and wrote a single, unadorned line, "I choose to end it." By 4:47 a.m., the temporary command center was established in the basement of an abandoned office building downtown. No signs or emblems adorned the space, only the cold glare of white LED lights reflecting off a large wall screen displaying the tactical map with routes assigned to the 3 counterattacks. Jolie entered, makeup free, hair tied back tightly. Her eyes swept the room and stopped at the coordination center, where a lone figure sat with his back turned, leaning close to a keyboard, thin shoulders hunched, hair tousled. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. Min Tran turned around, wearing a gray jacket over a t-shirt, one shoulder still bandaged. Behind his glasses, his eyes shone with fierce determination, despite his recent life-threatening surgery. "I can't just sit still while the team goes into battle," Min said softly but with firm conviction. "Whatever you decide, or do, I'm here to support and help you." Jolie didn't reply immediately. She regarded him quietly for a long moment, and for the first time allowed a soft warmth to pass through her eyes. Min pulled a small device from his backpack, a handheld encoder he had designed during his hospital stay. "This will replace all old transmission lines. No signal will go in or out without passing through this filter. Absolutely secure." She took the device and placed it on the table as a symbol of trust. Then she sat beside Min, and together they watched the screen, running the mission simulation. The map displayed routes for Teams 1 and 2. Small icons moved steadily, like the heartbeat of a mission where life and death balanced precariously. Jolie handed Min the latest file. "The third name. The one meeting Sinclair." She paused briefly. "The State Law Enforcement Fund Director, a man who once openly declared that police need supreme immunity." Min didn't flinch. He exhaled quietly. "They never thought we'd dare fight back." At that moment, Sarah entered, holding the final plan board. She stopped when she saw Min, raised an eyebrow, and then smiled slightly. "Breaking doctor's orders again?" "Sorry," Min shrugged. "I thought I should be here when it all starts." Sarah laid her hand firmly on his shoulder. "Good, because when this ends, you'll be the one telling the story of why we did this." No words of encouragement were necessary. No one spoke of glory or victory. Every person present bore scars, losses, and a deep belief that if they didn't end this now, others would fall, just as Min nearly had. Jolie stood, nodded at Min and Sarah. It's time to act. Each team moved into position. Headsets clicked on. Test signals were sent through the communication lines. A thin green line pulsed steadily across the screen, tiny lights moving like a living, breathing organism, coursing through the system. One by one, everyone left the room without looking back. No one knew if they would return whole after today, but all understood that retreat now would render everything lost meaningless. Min sat alone before the central screen, tracking each moving dot, each steady encrypted pulse. Under the dim glow of the monitor, his face appeared older, as if forged and matured by the bullet that had nearly taken his life. Outside, dawn had not yet broken, but inside the silent command center, amidst the steady tapping of keys and the hum of machines, one thing rose strong and undeniable: trust. The first trial began in a tense and highly anticipated atmosphere. The courtroom was packed with reporters, officials, lawyers, and members of the public, all eager to witness the unfolding of a case that had gripped the community. Flashbulbs continuously flashed as cameras and video recorders captured every moment of the opening day of the trial against William Keller and Edward Sinclair, two names that had become synonymous with corruption and abuse of power within the system. Jolie Bennett stood alongside other witnesses, dressed in a solemn black suit, her face marked by determination and intense focus. As an FBI agent and a key witness, she was acutely aware of the gravity of her testimony. She understood that her words might very well alter the course of the case, potentially setting a precedent for accountability in a system long plagued by silence and complicity. The judge entered the courtroom, his presence commanding immediate respect. The gavel struck sharply, signaling the official commencement of proceedings. The atmosphere instantly hushed, every eye fixed on the bench. The prosecutor, tasked with steering the case, rose confidently, his voice firm and resolute as he presented the charges. Keller and Sinclair stood accused of grave misconduct, abuse of power, systemic corruption, manipulation of legal frameworks, and intimidation tactics designed to silence dissenters and whistleblowers. Opposing them, Keller and Sinclair's defense lawyers moved swiftly to mount their shield. They employed every legal strategy available, probing for inconsistencies and loopholes in the prosecution's evidence. Their questioning aimed to sow doubt, seeking to dismantle the credibility of witnesses through relentless cross-examination and legal technicalities. Keller, seated at the defendant's table, wore a cold, defiant expression. His eyes scanned the courtroom with contempt, a clear message to all present that he considered himself untouchable. Sinclair, the shadowy figure behind the underground network of influence, appeared equally resolute. Occasionally a sarcastic smirk would cross his lips, betraying a confidence that the machinery of power would protect him from justice. Despite the palpable tension in the room, Jolie remained composed. Her mind recalled every painful encounter, every moment she faced injustice head-on. Above all, she felt the weight of responsibility. This trial was more than a personal battle. It was a chance to restore faith in the system. The defense's attempts to delay and obfuscate were numerous. Requests for adjournments, objections over procedural nuances, and elaborate legal arguments sought to derail the proceedings. Yet the prosecution and Jolie's team met these challenges with steadfast resolve, holding firm to the undeniable facts and honest witness testimonies. Throughout the trial, Jolie's gaze would occasionally drift toward the victims' families and supporters gathered outside the courtroom. Their silent prayers and unwavering trust strengthened her resolve. She was not just fighting for herself, but for all who had suffered in silence. The opening segment closed amid fiery debate and intense questioning. The atmosphere brimmed with anticipation, and it was clear that this trial would be protracted. Nevertheless, the signs of justice steadily advancing were undeniable. The trial progressed into a pivotal stage with the presentation of initial testimonies. Jolie Bennett took the stand, confronting Keller's abuse of authority with unflinching clarity. Her eyes, steady and determined, commanded the courtroom's attention. Her calm voice recounted every harrowing detail, from Keller's violent shove on the crowded street to the painstaking evidence gathering that exposed a vast web of corruption within the police force. Reporters eagerly documented her testimony, while defense attorneys made vigorous attempts to disrupt, question, and undermine her credibility. Keller's counsel went as far as insinuating personal motives behind Jolie's involvement, seeking to cast shadows on her impartiality. Yet Jolie's composure never faltered. Each question was met with clear, precise answers. Her unwavering gaze and professional demeanor turned provocation into strength, convincing both the court and the public of her truthfulness. Amidst the mounting tension, the prosecutor unveiled a breakthrough. New evidence in the form of a secret recording, retrieved from a device provided by Min Tran. The recording revealed covert conversations between Keller and his collaborators, discussing methods to erase incriminating files, manipulate evidence, and intimidate potential whistleblowers. This revelation electrified the courtroom. Whispers rippled through the crowd, Jolie's supporters were invigorated, and Keller's camp grew visibly unsettled. Defense lawyers reacted swiftly, contesting the recording's authenticity. They demanded a comprehensive forensic review and requested the trial be postponed to accommodate this new development. The courtroom buzzed with escalating debates, the legal battle intensifying on all fronts. By the conclusion of this segment, the court decided to suspend the trial temporarily. The pause was necessary to authenticate the recording and to prepare for the subsequent phases of the investigation. The room was thick with suspense and uncertainty. Observers left the courtroom with heightened anticipation for the unfolding drama in this fiercely contested legal fight, a battle that promised to challenge deep-rooted powers and push the pursuit of justice to its limits. The trial entered its decisive phase as Jolie Bennett and the legal team prepared to present key evidence to convict William Keller and Edward Sinclair. The courtroom was packed, from journalists to tense observers watching every move. The atmosphere was suffocating, everyone holding their breath, waiting for the moment the new evidence would be unveiled. Suddenly, a new witness was summoned, a former internal affairs officer named David Harlan, who entered the room with tired but determined eyes. David carried a small USB, claiming it contained secret recordings from closed-door meetings between Keller, Sinclair, and other officials in the corruption network. He affirmed his legal responsibility for the authenticity of the recordings. The presiding judge ordered the playback of the recordings. A deep, tense voice filled the courtroom, replaying conversations about deleting files, arranging evidence, and threatening whistleblowers. Lawyers and witnesses were stunned by the extent and blatant nature of the conspiracy. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Some shouted, others exchanged whispers of disbelief. Keller's defense lawyers quickly rebutted, claiming the recordings could be doctored and unreliable. They demanded independent verification and insisted on their client's innocence. David Harlan stood firm, testifying that he vouched for the recording's authenticity and was ready to accept any criminal liability if proven false. His courage compelled the court and public to take the evidence seriously. Jolie and the legal team immediately leveraged the recordings to strengthen their case. They requested that the court expand investigations into allegations of corruption and abuse of power within the police department and judiciary. Jolie's cold, determined gaze showed she would not let those behind the scenes escape justice. Tensions escalated sharply. Parties in the courtroom began fierce debates, each defending their position. Discussions over the legality of evidence, rights, and responsibilities of the involved parties were thoroughly analyzed. The trial turned into a fierce intellectual battle, not only legal but also a fight for truth and justice. This story was not just about Keller or Sinclair, but a struggle to push back corruption and violence within the legal system. At the end of the session, judges ordered a recess to verify the recording's authenticity and prepare for the next steps in the investigation. Jolie stood, eyes fixed on the screen. She knew that with the new evidence, her fight had just begun, and many tough challenges awaited. The tension made the courtroom's atmosphere heavier, marking a major turning point in the trial. The adjournment left the courtroom heavy and tense, like before a great storm. Everyone present, from lawyers to officials, understood that the evidence just presented not only shook Keller's and Sinclair's reputations, but could topple a deep-rooted power within the local legal system. As the trial paused, waves of concern spread through related departments. Powerful forces, unwilling to let the truth be exposed, began to silently influence the court and Jolie's investigation team. Threatening messages were sent to group members, warning sternly to halt the inquiry. Jolie faced immense pressure. She received discreet calls from former colleagues warning her of risks, losing investigative authority, or even personal defamation aimed at undermining her credibility. Yet, with strong resolve, Jolie remained unshaken. She realized every threat only fueled her determination to fight to the end. Sarah Mitchell stood by Jolie's side during the toughest times. offering support. She spent much time encouraging, preparing morale, and coordinating the collection of additional documents to strengthen accusations. They held numerous secret meetings to develop new legal strategies, preparing for the next trial phase with more surprises. Outside the courthouse, media outlets began extensive coverage of the shocking recordings. Public interest surged, putting significant pressure on involved parties. Journalists delved deep, uncovering murky ties between the police and judiciary. The story became a symbol of the fight against corruption in public agencies. However, due to the case's complexity and influence, investigations and trials took longer than expected. Hidden conspiracies surfaced, and new, powerful figures quietly appeared with their own agendas. Jolie and her team faced many difficulties, including suspicion of betrayal by close colleagues. These challenges tested not only Jolie's expertise, but also her mental endurance. She often faced tough choices: to continue fighting at the risk of losing everything, or to retreat to protect herself and loved ones. But her determined eyes and inner oath never allowed her to consider quitting. The section ends with an image of Jolie stepping out of the courtroom after a long day, her eyes shining with faith and resolve. She knew the journey ahead was long. Tough battles awaited, but she was not alone. With Sarah and loyal teammates by her side, she believed justice would prevail, no matter the cost. Pressure mounted on Jolie Bennett's shoulders like dark clouds gathering endlessly over her life, casting shadows that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Opposing forces, deeply entrenched both within the police system and perched high atop the corridors of power, unleashed relentless attacks, threats, and widespread media manipulation aimed at tarnishing her reputation and undermining the critical work she was doing. Every move Jolie made was watched with unyielding scrutiny, every decision dissected under the unblinking eyes of those determined to silence her voice and halt her progress. The weight of these relentless pressures threatened to crush her spirit, yet amid the storm an unexpected ally emerged: Attorney General Helen Carrington, a formidable and influential woman wielding significant political clout and unwavering commitment to justice. At a surprise press conference held with little warning, attended by hundreds of reporters and media outlets eager to capture the moment, Carrington boldly declared her unequivocal support for Jolie Bennett and the anti-corruption campaign she spearheaded. She emphasized that the government would marshal every necessary resource, legal, financial, and institutional, to uphold justice and cleanse the system of its deep-seated corruption. Her voice carried the weight of authority, yet offered a refreshing breath of hope in Jolie's mind, mingling relief with an acute sense of vigilance. Jolie knew all too well that those opposing her crusade would never surrender easily or quietly. The Attorney General's public endorsement significantly shifted the balance of power in Jolie's favor, but also introduced new complexities and risks into an already volatile fight. News of Carrington's support spread swiftly and decisively through the covert meeting rooms of officials, influential insiders, and shadowy power brokers. Keller and his co-conspirators felt the tremors of unease ripple through their carefully laid plans as they realized the landscape was changing beneath their feet. They now faced not fragmented factions or isolated threats, but a unified government apparatus aligned firmly with Jolie Bennett's pursuit of justice. Standing silently by the conference room window, Jolie's eyes reflected a tempered determination, a mixture of cautious optimism and hard-earned wariness. She understood that her new ally represented not only raw power, but also a beacon of hope for the long and relentless battle ahead. With this powerful backing, she vowed never to stand alone again, fully aware that those lurking in the shadows would now be confronting a stronger, more formidable opponent than ever before. Inside Carrington's brightly lit meeting chamber, her presence symbolized a pivotal turning point in the anti-corruption campaign, opening a new chapter for Jolie Bennett and her team. Seizing the momentum created by this political endorsement, Jolie's squad gained access to classified files that had previously been sealed off, unreachable to outside investigators. Min Tran, supported by the Justice Department's top cybersecurity and forensic experts, delved deeper into the murky depths of the dark power network. meticulously peeling back each protective layer that concealed its illicit activities. Meanwhile, Carrington expanded her alliances, forging stronger ties with civic organizations, independent media outlets, and passionate justice activists. This coalition ignited a wave of support, numbering in the thousands, creating mounting pressure on the remaining corrupt forces, effectively shrinking their space to maneuver and regroup. Jolie quickly became the symbolic face of the burgeoning movement, her image and story inspiring citizens and courageous colleagues alike to rise up and demand accountability. Yet, as her position solidified and her influence expanded, the dangers she faced multiplied exponentially. The corrupt factions struck back with sophisticated and covert campaigns designed to smear Jolie's honor and reputation. Behind-the-scenes political maneuvers sought to destabilize her efforts, sow distrust, and fracture her coalition. In response, Sarah Mitchell and the rest of the team ramped up security measures, dedicating themselves to safeguarding not only Jolie's safety, but also that of her family and closest inner circle. Secret strategy sessions were convened continuously, adapting to emerging threats, recalibrating tactics, and working tirelessly to prevent leaks or infiltration. Through all these trials and relentless challenges, the fire in Jolie's eyes burned ever brighter. She knew full well that the path ahead would be arduous and fraught with hardship, but bolstered by the support of her powerful new ally, she had the strength and resolve to press onward. The final scene of this pivotal moment shows Jolie and Attorney General Carrington standing side by side on stage at a major national conference, facing thousands of supporters. Together, they stood as living emblems of an unstoppable revolution against injustice and corruption, a beacon of hope signaling that change, though hard-fought, was possible and inevitable. The retrial resumed after a lengthy period of adjournment, and the atmosphere inside the courtroom remained thick with tension, yet threaded with the glimmer of hope. After countless exhausting days spent meticulously gathering evidence, alongside the relentless efforts of Jolie Bennett and her legal team, the long-awaited moment of truth had finally arrived. Jolie stood before the court with unwavering confidence and composure, methodically presenting irrefutable proof detailing Keller's systemic abuse of power, acts of violence, and deep-rooted corruption. Carefully organized documents, compelling audio recordings, detailed photographs, and powerful witness statements collected by her team were unveiled one after another, gradually illuminating the dark and tangled web concealed within the local police and justice systems. Key witnesses were summoned to the stand, each recounting brazen acts of violence perpetrated under Keller's protection. Some testified about witnessing Keller threatening and assaulting innocent civilians without cause, while others revealed being coerced into falsifying reports to hide the truth. Even internal staff bravely described the threats they endured simply for daring to speak out. Their collective courage lent immense credibility and weight to the trial. These testimonies transcended mere statements. They were raw fragments of reality, exposing a deeply rotten and corrupted system. The courtroom gallery sat in rapt silence, many eyes welling with tears or glistening with emotion as the stark, painful truth unfolded before them. On the defense side, Keller and his accomplices desperately attempted to deny the overwhelming mounting evidence. Initially, they tried to rationalize or minimize their actions, spinning feeble narratives, but the avalanche of proof and credible testimony left them with no choice but to admit most of their wrongdoing. Their attempts at justification became weaker and disjointed as the weight of their own cruel deeds was laid bare, stripped away under the harsh and unforgiving light of justice. As the truth continued to unravel, the tension between the opposing parties gradually eased. Every lie was uncovered, every responsibility exposed, from Keller himself down to those who had shielded and enabled him, slowly untangling the complex web of injustice knot by knot. The courtroom seemed to breathe with the shifting tide, the atmosphere gently filling with a renewed sense of possibility and restored faith. Meanwhile, relentless media coverage and widespread public outrage outrage applied immense external pressure on the proceedings. News outlets continuously highlighted the uncovered scandals, and thousands of citizens followed the trial with a mixture of anger, hope, and fervent expectations for justice to prevail. Under this intense public scrutiny, the defendants found it increasingly impossible to escape accountability or manipulate the narrative any longer. Unexpectedly, several secondary antagonists began to reconsider their positions. Recognizing the gravity of their situations, they opted to cooperate fully with the court in exchange for reduced sentences. New testimonies and additional evidence emerged from their cooperation, peeling back further layers of the corrupt network until its very core was exposed. These revelations shed light on shadowy figures who had orchestrated and profited from systemic abuses, shaking the foundations of the entire corrupt apparatus. In that moment, Jolie and her colleagues felt a profound shift ripple through the courtroom atmosphere. Faith in justice was renewed, shining like a beacon piercing through pervasive darkness. Their tireless efforts, countless sacrifices, and unwavering determination were finally bearing fruit, promising a fair and fitting outcome for those who had harmed society and betrayed the public's trust. The trial pressed forward, no longer the solitary battle of one woman or a small team, but the collective struggle of an entire community, united to topple evil, reclaim truth, and restore fairness. Major conflicts were resolved, and now justice would speak for itself, cleansing the legal system and restoring public confidence. The courtroom transformed into a powerful symbol of hope, a place where the voices of the oppressed could finally be heard and vindicated. As the case entered its final phase, the air grew thick with solemn anticipation. After weeks of intense arguments and mountains of evidence painstakingly presented, the judicial panel began delivering verdicts for William Keller and his extensive corruption ring. The defendants received harsh sentences for violence, abuse of authority, corruption, and evidence tampering, punishments meticulously designed not only to penalize, but also to deter and to serve as a stern example across the entire police force. Keller, once a confident and aggressive officer, stood at the defendant's dock, dazed and unable to counter the overwhelming facts laid bare before him. His accomplices faced equally severe consequences: dismissal from service, revocation of all powers, and a series of legal penalties that would mark the definitive end of their careers and tarnished reputations. Slowly but surely, order and integrity began to be restored within the local law enforcement, though the price of justice had been steep, painful, and costly. Local residents and civic organizations hailed the verdict as a pivotal victory against long-standing injustice and rampant police misconduct. They organized public forums, community discussions, and marches, calling for deeper systemic reforms within both the police and judicial systems to prevent such abuses from ever recurring. The verdict ignited a wave of activism and community engagement, fueling widespread hope for a more transparent, accountable, and equitable future. Jolie Bennett and her team received well-deserved recognition for their perseverance, dedication, and exceptional bravery in unraveling this complex and insidious web of corruption. Their success breathed new life into the department, inspiring others within the justice system to continue the fight for social equity and reform. Their victory transcended the legal realm. It was a profound moral and symbolic triumph, a resolute reminder that truth can and will prevail even in the darkest and most corrupt places. Yet beneath this surface calm, unseen forces still lingered, quietly plotting their next moves. This persistent and sobering reminder that the battle against corruption and injustice would never truly end weighed heavily on Jolie as she gazed out her office window late into the evening. Her eyes, sharp and filled with cautious hope, reflected her enduring resolve. Justice is an ongoing journey, fraught with endless challenges, but one she was fully prepared to face without hesitation. With unwavering determination, Jolie understood that every victory was but a step forward, and the path ahead demanded constant vigilance, courage, and solidarity. Though this chapter had closed on one fierce battle, the greater war for justice and integrity would continue. carried forward by those like Jolie, who refused to let darkness prevail or silence the call for truth and fairness. Jolie Bennett stood in the familiar FBI office where she had spent many demanding years, the pale afternoon light gently filtering through the large window, casting soft shadows over the worn wooden desk strewn with files, notes, and scattered documents. The air felt heavy but charged with purpose, as the fight against injustice and corruption showed no signs of stopping. Although masterminds like Keller and Sinclair had been arrested and publicly disgraced, the dark power network beneath them still held numerous undisclosed links, quietly lurking in the shadows, biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to turn the tide back in their favor. This persistent threat hung over Jolie like a silent storm on the horizon, ever present and foreboding. The pressure on Jolie grew heavier with each passing day. Every step she took was closely monitored by unseen eyes. Every document she handled, every word she spoke, could potentially become a target for attacks from the opposition determined to silence her. Yet, in her eyes burned an unwavering determination, an inner fire fueled by the certainty that she was on the right path, no matter what sacrifices lay ahead. This flame within her, fragile yet fiercely resilient, was the beacon that kept her moving forward, despite the exhaustion and danger. During countless sleepless nights, she sat alone at her desk, flipping through files and records with growing fatigue but unshakable resolve. The hours blurred together in a haze of data and testimony, yet she never wavered. Her teammates stood firmly beside her, forming an unyielding wall of support against the mounting dangers. Among them, Min Tran, a close friend and dedicated colleague, offered steadfast companionship, supporting her not only professionally but also as a solid emotional anchor in moments of doubt, fatigue, and fear. Their shared resolve was a quiet strength amid the chaos. One peaceful afternoon, as the team prepared for a new campaign, Min unexpectedly took a quiet moment with Jolie. Looking at her with sincere warmth and an unspoken promise, he said, "Jolie, you are not alone. I want to walk with you, not just as a teammate, but as a life partner." Hearing these words, Jolie's heart beat faster, a mixture of surprise, hope, and cautious joy swelling within her. Instead of answering immediately, she smiled gently, her eyes shimmering with a flicker of hope intertwined with concern. That smile was not just acceptance. It was a promise of a future that might be filled with challenges, but also strength, faith, and companionship through the hardships ahead. The space between them seemed to pause in that moment. Everything around suddenly felt warm, meaningful, and profound. Jolie knew the road ahead was still long and difficult, but with Min's support and affection, she felt more motivated than ever to keep fighting. Though the battle was far from over and new challenges awaited, Jolie Bennett was ready to face them all. She stood firm like a lighthouse amid a vast, restless Ea, constantly shining to guide her companions and the society that thirsted for justice, no matter how fierce the storms. The next morning, Jolie woke earlier than usual. The sky was veiled with thin clouds. Soft light filtered gently through the curtains, neither too bright nor gloomy, much like her mood at that moment. The fight continued, but something in the air felt different. Support was spreading wider and deeper, and those who had once lurked in the shadows were now cautious, aware that their time might be running out. There was a growing sense that change was inevitable. Following the Keller-Sinclair trial, waves of calls for transparency and reform reached far and wide, resonating within the judiciary, the media, and among the people themselves. Jolie sat at her desk, sifting through reports and heartfelt handwritten letters from strangers, some thanking her for speaking out, others sharing the injustices they had suffered silently for years. Each line was a testament that this battle was not hers alone, but part of a larger collective striving for truth and fairness. She recalled the early days, being knocked down on the street, labeled a troublemaker, ignored or dismissed by many. Yet now, in that very place, people held banners bearing her name, stood alongside her, believing that a black woman could become a symbol of courage and integrity. That transformation was humbling and inspiring, a living proof of how one person's courage can ripple outward. At a public meeting in City Hall, Jolie appeared alongside Minister Helen Carrington. Though neither spoke initially, their presence alone silenced the room. People filled every aisle, some holding up wooden signs that read, "No more fear, we have Jolie." When Jolie stepped onto the podium, she did not speak of victory. Instead, she spoke of continuation, that justice is not a destination but a journey, long, arduous, and one that requires many to walk together, shoulder to shoulder. As the crowd dispersed, men approached her quietly. Without exchanging words, they stood silently side by side. Men gently squeezed her hand, and this time Jolie did not pull away. Together, they looked far ahead, to where a group of students were painting a large mural on a nearby building wall, an image of Jolie holding up an investigation file, her eyes full of unwavering faith and quiet determination. Jolie smiled, not for love nor for praise, but because she knew what she had started was now carried on by others. The story had no ending yet, but with people like men, like Helen, and hundreds more standing behind her, Jolie was sure of one thing: they would not turn back, and neither would she. No guns were fired, nor were there grand proclamations. Jolie Bennett's journey began with a contemptuous glance, a derogatory remark, and a slap from a power named prejudice. She was not the only victim. Her story represented millions who had been judged, denied, or pushed into darkness simply because of their skin color, gender, or background. Jolie was an FBI agent, but that title did not shield her from discrimination. She was intelligent, steadfast, yet dragged through the streets, humiliated like a criminal just for standing where others thought she did not belong. What gave this story its weight was not Jolie's title, but how she faced it, not with impulsive anger, but with resilient thoughtfulness, transforming pain into concrete action. From an irrationally beaten victim, she gradually exposed a rotten power network. Names like Keller and Sinclair, once pillars of the justice system, were revealed with vile schemes. Above them were invisible hands like Charles Mary, manipulating policy and reputation alike. Jolie did not fight alone. Beside her were Sarah, Min, and teammates who refused to back down in the face of danger. The price they paid was real blood, loss, distorted honor, and sophisticated attacks, both physical and media-based. Yet from all this, the deepest lesson emerged. Justice is not something given freely in courts. It is something people must courageously claim. Jolie's story was not merely an investigation. It reflected modern society, a place where power and prejudice combine to crush the weak. But it also showed that in every corrupt system, there are those who refuse to remain silent. Lesson 1. Don't rush to judge others based on prejudice. A person's entering a store with dark skin does not define their character or value, yet disdainful glances and biased head shakes can wound them for life. Jolie was humiliated not because she was incompetent, but because others refused to understand her. Lesson 2. Talent and dignity cannot be dismissed simply because one stays silent. Jolie didn't need to shout to prove her worth. She did so through actions, data, investigation, and evidence. Ultimately, all of America learned her name, not as a victim, but as someone brave enough to stand up. Lesson 3. Justice always finds a way to prevail, if someone is willing to pay the price. From a distorted truth, Jolie sparked a movement. She not only forced a corrupt cop to pay, but also made the entire system reevaluate itself. Despite threats and revocation of authority, she stood firm. In Lesson 4, silence is sometimes the greatest complicity. Many of Jolie's colleagues remained silent, turned away, or even spoke ill of her out of fear of danger. But that silence protected evil. Without people like Jolie who would dare ask, who's rewriting the truth behind the scenes? Have you ever been wrongly judged because someone didn't understand you? Have you ever been underestimated or sidelined, only to quietly prove you were better than they thought? Jolie's story is more than a case. It is a reminder. Be brave in facing injustice, even if you are the only one standing. Don't let prejudice measure human worth. Don't let people like Keller, Sinclair, and Merrick remain in the shadows of unchecked power. If you find this story valuable, share it so more people can see. Share so no one has to stay silent anymore. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the journey of truth. Thank you to our viewers. First and foremost, we want to sincerely thank Yo for taking the time to watch, reflect, and stay with this story until the very end. Whether you stumbled upon this episode by chance or were drawn in by something deeper, a memory, a shared experience, or a feeling of being misunderstood, your presence here means more than we can say. The story of Jolie Bennett is not just a work of fiction or a dramatic narrative. It was shaped by real patterns in today's society, where people are still judged by skin color, where power can silence the truth, and where justice does not always arrive unless someone dares to speak out. We know each viewer carries their own interpretation. Some of you may feel connected, others outraged or quietly inspired. Some may have questions, suggestions, or hopes for where this story could go next. That's why we invite you to share your thoughts with us. If you have feedback about the plot, dialogue, character arcs, or even just how the story made you feel, we're listening. You can leave a comment, send a message, or reach us through any of the channels listed below. Every suggestion is a chance for us to grow, to deepen, and to connect more meaningfully with our audience. Because storytelling is not just about expressing, it's about hearing others too. And to us, the most valuable outcome isn't views or shares, it's the genuine connection between the storyteller and the listener. Thank you for believing in this story. Thank you for believing that stories can change perspectives, move hearts, and sometimes spark action. We hope to meet you again in the next chapter, where truth, justice, and compassion remain at the heart of everything we create. And please remember, if you have something to say, we are always here to listen.